Good afternoon, everyone. As I mentioned, my name is Susan Kennedy, and I am the Director of Internships and Career Development here at Regis. And I'm joined today by members of the Regis Alumni Association who graduated during the 2008 Great Recession. I'm joined by Amanda Curtis, Danielle Angelillo, Maria Davis, and Caitlin Shea. And they have been kind enough to share some of their thoughts and advice with you all on, how to find a job during uncertain times. And I was going to, start this whole session off with this little cheerleading routine about you can do it, you can do it. And then I found out over the weekend that 3 of your classmates just landed fantastic jobs. So companies are definitely hiring. Trevon Wright just got a job with Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Lauren Butt will be working in business development for Pegasystems. And Colin Amadon, who's actually a rising senior, just got a job with Fidelity Investments. So I'm sure there's going to be more to come. And I share that information, just to give people some hope. I'm finding that there's a bigger impact on internships than there are on full-time jobs. The full-time jobs, you may have to start remotely, but it is what it is kind of thing. But at this time, what I wanted to do is ask our panelists to introduce themselves to you, and tell them a little bit about their career path. And at the end, we'll definitely have time for student questions, or grad questions, excuse me. So Amanda, could you please introduce yourself and tell us about your career path?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm Amanda Curtis. I graduated in 2008. My career path was, so I'll start out by saying I graduated from Regis with a BSW, Bachelor's in Social Work. And after I graduated from Regis, I went straight on 3 months later into my graduate degree program with Simmons in Boston. I did their advanced standing program and received my master's with them in 11 months. And while I was going to school at Simmons, I was interning at the same time, which was a requirement of my master's program. So I was interning full-time with Worcester, at the time, it was Westboro State Hospital. And I was in one of the locked behavioral adolescent psychiatric units, and that's where I did my training. It was pretty intensive when I was there. I had some great mentors, and I learned a tremendous amount. And when I was finished with my just about year placement with them, there was a job opening on their behavioral intensive unit. And they really liked the idea of hiring from within and having somebody that they knew, really knew how the programs worked. So I was offered that job at that time, which I was very fortunate to have. So that was in 2009. So I had stayed there for a little over a year. At the time, I was 22. I was pretty young, I felt. And it was my real first exposure to any sort of mental health training and mental health care. And it was kind of a lot, I think, to take on right out of school. So I was looking for a little bit of a change of pace. So about 1.5 to 2 years after that, I took a different job as, not really a change of pace, but as a crisis clinician, working in the community of Framingham, working for an agency called Advocates. And my primary role was working with the Framingham Police Department in their jail diversion program. So I was the clinician that would ride around with the officers, and any calls that they received that were requiring any sort of mental health intervention or any sort of social services that could be provided, I would co-respond with them. And the whole purpose of my job and program was for diversion. So anybody who would qualify that needed, substance abuse treatment or mental health treatment, my job was to divert them appropriately to the services. So to the hospital, as opposed to being arrested and going to jail. So I was I was there for over a year as well, and that too was a pretty intense
Sounds like it.
work environment. So at that time, I was probably 24, 25. And I found myself sort of wanting a break. I wanted a change of pace. I didn't know what that looked like, but I was pretty burnt out. And for anybody on the call who has like a clinical or a social work background, you know, one of the things that gets talked about in that profession specifically is self-care and being able to take care of yourself. So I definitely looked for a change of pace. And so it was at that time that I was like, you know what, let me see if social work can fit into corporate America anywhere, which generally wasn't something that I had thought of for my career. I always thought that I would just be a medical social worker or a social worker kind of feet on the ground. But I really, really needed the change of pace for my own self and my sanity. So I found a job posting at John Hancock in Boston. They were looking for what they called an internal care manager to work for one of their insurance divisions. So I interviewed with them and I got the job. And when I was first there, I said, oh my gosh, what have I done? This was a horrible decision because corporate was so foreign to me. I didn't study business in school. I really didn't think that I had a place where I really belonged there. But I let myself settle in. I gave myself some time. And then sort of here I am 9 years later, and I'm still with John Hancock. So through my time there, I transitioned roles from internal case manager to a customer integration specialist with the company. And now I'm in my position of a senior business analyst at John Hancock. So quite different from social work, but that's my career path and that's where I am today. And I'm very, very happy.
That's terrific. Let me ask you, what is a senior business analyst?
That's a really good question. So it's a lot of things, to be totally honest with you. And I think, you know, when I think about kind of how I landed here, coming from the background that I did, I was always really intrigued about fixing sort of things that were broken or processes that maybe don't work as well as they could be had they, you know, be given a little bit of attention or tweaking. So a business analyst, and in full transparency, I started my job in January, and a lot of the things in this world shifted come March. But my role currently in the overall role of a business analyst is to really kind of bring different operational venues in the business together. You run projects, you lead projects, and you are kind of the voice of the business and of the operation. So when there are projects being implemented or there are initiatives that are underway, your role as the analyst is to kind of see the forest through the trees and be able to kind of do some of that analysis that would be necessary for any project or any sort of implementation that's coming in to be able to be done successfully. And at the end of the day, ultimately, to make sure that it benefits both the company and the customer that we're serving.
Great, thank you. I know when you and I spoke initially to kind of create this panel, I loved that you went from social work into corporate America, because it really proves that, you know, your first job is not necessarily your last job, and that there are, you know, so many different paths that you can take. Danielle, would you mind sharing a little bit about your career path with us?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Danielle Angelillo. I actually graduated in 2006, a little bit before the first bubble breaking, I guess is how we'll put it. So I graduated with a BA in information systems and a minor in management. I'm 99% sure Regis doesn't have information systems anymore. So I think I was like one of the last people that did it. But it was great. I don't know if Dr. Kovianich is still there, but she was wonderful. So that's too bad. She's great. So what I did was, when I was graduating, I applied for a few IS jobs across the state just to kind of see what would hit. I wasn't 100% sure.
Excuse me, is IS Information Services?
Information systems. Yep.
Systems. Thank
So
you.
it's, so there's, information systems is a overarching degree that includes like computer science, but it also goes into like not just programming, but how things work, database structures, nerd things. So that's kind of what I had done there. So I applied for a few different positions across the state, and actually in my time at Regis, my senior year, I took a master's class as part of my undergraduate, just to kind of add more additional flavor and stuff like that per recommendation of Dr. Kovianich. So I took a class with someone who actually worked at this company called Meditech, and they make electronic medical record systems. They're based out of Massachusetts. So I worked there originally. I got a job offer. They hire a lot of right out of college grads. So if you don't have a job and you are interested, I highly recommend starting there. Don't finish your career there by any means, but start there because they train you great. They will not pay you a ton. You will not be making a lot of money, but it is like a second college degree, the amount of training they provide to you. So I definitely recommend that. And my other companies that I have worked at, I haven't been onboarded as well as I was at Meditech. So I do recommend that you still haven't found anything. See if it's hiring.
Excellent.
A few years, I switched to a software company called Pisces in Wakefield. It did come with increase in salary and a shorter commute. I was focused on what they're called interfaces, but basically it's how you transfer data from your admitting system to the pharmacy dispensing cabinet on the floor. So if the doctor orders an Advil for the patient in a hospital, the message gets generated in the ordering system and then shows up on the floor in the cabinet, and it'll say, okay, Danielle Angelillo can get one Advil. So it kind of like, it's an interface. It shares data in between systems. So that's what I've been focusing on. I worked at Pisces and decided to enroll in graduate school. I went to Northeastern University, the Beauview College of Health, and I got my master's degree in healthcare informatics. So I'm opposite of Amanda, where I found something right away that I liked and stuck with it. So I have my master's degree in healthcare informatics from Northeastern, and while I was at Northeastern, I met a lot of different people from a lot of different companies. It was definitely a great networking tool. If you can, go and get your master's degree, go to a bigger school. There's a lot of networking. I had always went to smaller schools, including Regis, and then when I got to Northeastern, I was blown away. But the majority of people that were getting their masters were from Partners Healthcare, which is now known as Mass General Brigham. For those of you that don't know, we're rebranding. So I did some networking in grad school, and I did a class with my first boss at Partners Healthcare, and I told her I was interested. She told me to apply, and I started implementing software at Partners Healthcare, and it's a project called eCare. So we implement Epic, which is a medical record system based out of Verona, Wisconsin. And we implemented Epic at all of Partners Healthcare systems. So Mass General, Brigham, Newton Moseley, North Shore Medical Center, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, Foley Dickinson, Wentworth Douglas, Spalding's, and McLean. I think I got them all. So it was what they labeled the big dig of healthcare. It was a $1 billion implementation. And now if you show up at any of those hospitals, your medical record is shared. So you can go and get a consultation. Oh, and I forgot Dana-Farber. Of course I did. If your provider is at Mass General and you need a consult at Dana-Farber, you don't have to carry anything with you. It's already there. It's great for the doctors to see, stuff like that. And again, I work on the integration team. I started as an analyst too. I moved to a project specialist, which is a more senior role. I became a team lead of about 5 to 6 people, and now I'm a manager of a team of 24.
Wow.
So I'm an integration manager, and I received about 6 or 8 weeks ago, I finished an online certificate program from Cornell with women in leadership. And that allowed me to enhance my leadership skills, as well as understand how women leaders in the workplace are able to succeed versus their male counterparts, and, you know, ways to, I think with me, I'm a little loud and obnoxious. So sometimes I'll challenge in a way that might be off-putting to some. So I definitely have learned how to challenge in a better way. So I'm always constantly learning and advancing. So I would suggest that 100% if you can, to continue learning. And it does come in, it is very helpful, even just for networking.
Yep. Yep. That's terrific. Thank you. Maria.
So mine is a little bit more straightforward and a little more similar to Danielle, actually. I graduated from Regis in class of 2008 alongside Caitlin and Amanda, who are both here today. The three of us actually participated in many school events together and served as residence assistants together for the Res Life department. I graduated with a major in English and secondary education, so I'm in the education field. And like Danielle, I found something, I stuck with it, I loved it, and I am still in the education field today. So when I graduated, I started working for Framingham Public School System as a world language teacher and an English teacher for 7th grade. Mm-hmm. I taught middle school, so 6th, 7th, and 8th grade for all languages, Spanish and French, and then taught 7th grade English. So when we graduated, like we all know, it was a difficult time in the economy and they had cut certain teachers. So I was one of those teachers that was newly hired, desperate for a job, and teaching like 7 courses in a matter of a day. So it was a very heavy load, student load. I was there at Cameron Middle School for about 7 years. And then I transferred over to the Framingham High School as the World Languages Department head. So that was my first leadership role. And there I oversaw 16 world language teachers and about 121 courses. So it was quite a shift, but what I really liked particularly about that role was that I was able to supervise teachers through the supervision and evaluation system, but also still teach 2 classes. So I had a foot in the classroom, but also a foot in a leadership administrative role.
Right.
After that, I transferred over to Barberry Elementary School. So now I've been serving there as a vice principal for 3 years, and next year I'll be interim principal of Barberry. So it's been quite a shift, but I loved it that it's been in Framingham Public Schools, and I'm going into my 13th year in Framingham Public Schools, having seen all 3 levels, K through 12, and all 3 in different roles. So wow. That's a little bit about my career path.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Caitlin, it's okay if I call you Caitlin and not Shea?
Yes, you can call me Caitlin. This is a professional setting, yes.
Could you take a few minutes and talk to the students about your path?
Sure. So my name is Caitlin Shea. I graduated with the class of 2008. I was a communication major, and at the time I had every intention of pursuing something in the marketing, advertising, public relations field. Really, my decision-making in terms of being a communication major was, and this is ridiculous, but I thought I wanted to be a nurse. I realized that dealt with blood and maybe some sad stories, so I decided to bypass that. Then I thought I wanted to be an education major, but I was an athlete at Regis, and I found out quickly into my freshman year that the education courses conflicted with my soccer schedule, so I decided to forego being an education major. That was literally my thought process. And so by default, I became a communication major because I literally had no idea what else I wanted to pursue. So upon graduating in 2008, I still had no idea what I wanted to do. I had done some internships within kind of the public relations field, writing press releases and stuff like that. It wasn't anything that really grabbed my interest, so I was kind of at a loss. It actually was Laura Bertinazzi who had mentioned that I should pursue something within higher education. I had no idea what that meant at the time. And when I graduated, I moved back home to my parents' house in Western Massachusetts, which is where I grew up. My mother had suggested at the time that when she graduated from college, she was an admissions counselor at a local college and suggested that I probably should look into doing something similar. So by default, not realizing that higher ed was a career path, I applied to a couple of college admissions positions in the general Western Mass area. Didn't get any initially, and then actually got a call back from Bay Path University after having not initially been given a job there, kind of a second rounder. They had somebody else that dropped last minute, late August. So I took the position. I was at Bay Path as an admissions counselor for 2.5 years. And there I completed my master's in higher education administration. So I quickly learned in that first job that I don't know everything. As a young college grad, you don't know everything. There are career paths out there that you're just not aware of. And so my big suggestion here is just being open to ideas and suggestions that kind of come your way. Adults typically, with most things, are the experts. So if something comes your way and you may not think it's the ideal position, it's still worth kind of grabbing at it, just because it gets your foot in the door and it starts allowing you to build that professional resume. So I was at Bay Path as an admissions counselor until 2011, when I completed my master's in higher ed. In early 2011, I decided that I wanted to relocate to more of the Eastern Mass area, which is where all of my friends were, having gone to college out there. So I relocated to Framingham, and actually was close to Maria, location-wise at that point. So worked at Mass Bay Community College for a short period of time in their admissions office. Realized shortly that the state system within higher ed is kind of quirky, with unions and everything like that. And it really wasn't a challenging fit for me. I was young, I was 24 at the time, and I was mostly working with adult students looking to go back to kind of either get a degree in a different field, or students who were kind of starting a second career path. And I struggled to identify with mostly adult students. So at that point, actually, I had heard at the time from Kara Kolomitz that there was an open admissions position at Regis. So after a short stint at Mass Bay, I went over back to Regis, and was an admissions counselor at Regis for 2 years. I wouldn't have worked with any of you in the pipeline because I'm much older. So did that for 2 years. And then actually at that point in 2013, decided that I was tired of higher education admissions. It was kind of, I was tired of traveling. The perk of admissions is that you're traveling on somebody else's dime. So for those young adults out there who are looking for somewhat of an adventure and maybe aren't sure, college admissions is a great opportunity. You travel all over New England or all over the country, really on behalf of a college, talking about that particular school, meeting and connecting with prospective families and students, education consultants, high school guidance counselors. I'm a fairly social being, so that was right up my alley. And again, you're traveling on the college's dime, which is oddly appealing at times. But in 2013, I was getting a little old for that. So I decided to actually switch to residence life, still sticking within that higher education model. And I was a residential coordinator in Angela Hall, actually, for a year. After that, I realized that I was too old to be living on a college campus, and I missed kind of having that independence of living on my own, not with 200 plus first year students. So I then actually got a job at Becker College in Worcester. At Becker, I was an assistant director of admissions for their adult population. They call it the Office of Continuing Education. So I, again, kind of revisited my roots to Mass Bay, and I continued working with adult students looking to return to school in the evening hours to complete their degree. In fall of 2017, maybe, yeah, 17, I came across a position at Dynamy Internship Year, which is also in Worcester, as the director of admissions for their program, which is a gap year program. And it's a gap year program that focuses on internships and independent living. So for most students, when they, similar maybe to your situation, when you graduate from high school, a lot of our students head right off to college, but there is a thing called taking a gap year in which you're able to kind of grow and learn and explore outside of an academic world. So I am now going on 3 years at Dynamy Internship Year as their director of admissions. So I have left higher education, but I have still stayed true to kind of that admissions enrollment, kind of building on those communication skills with prospective students and families. My biggest piece of advice to you as a young graduate, which congratulations, is really to just keep an open mind. Never in a million years would I have guessed that I would switch out of higher education. Never in a million years would I guess that I would be the director of admissions for a program. But I think, in kind of speaking with everybody else here on the alumni panel, we've taken some opportunities that have come our way and we've really made the most out of them. Some decisions professionally are great, other professional decisions are not so great, but each time you make a decision, you learn along the way. And I think that's what's allowed all of us to be in the leadership positions that we're in. So good luck and congrats. But that is kind of my pipeline of life.
Thank you, Caitlin. That was great. Do any of the other panelists have some specific career advice, thinking about you know, when you all graduated, it was a difficult financial time. And I think that, you know, students now, I don't want to say it's difficult. I think it's uncertain is probably a better word. But is there some specific advice that you might want to share with our graduates?
I would, Susan.
Okay.
I think there's a couple things. I think that all I heard about when I was graduating was networking. I don't really think that I understood fully like what that meant. And I was like whatever, I'll be fine. Like people know people and it'll be fine. I guess I didn't really realize the benefit and the value. I think that kind of from just about everyone's story, you can hear some flavor of networking, or someone who met someone in a college class, or like, you know, Caitlin, who kept in touch with people back at Regis and then came back to Regis for a little bit. I would advise I think LinkedIn is a great tool. I think that it's a tool that a lot can be learned from. You can keep connected with a lot of people, but it also can open up a lot of opportunities for you. There is a job base on there as well, but it's also a way to meet connections and have recruiters and people like that find you on there based upon your information and your skill set and your licensure or work history and things like that you put on there. So it's one piece of advice that I really didn't take to heart, the networking piece, until I got into this role about 8 or 9 years ago, when I got into John Hancock, and I really recognized how big of a piece that was, especially if you're working in corporate America, and the connections and the people that you meet and that you know. And then my other piece of advice is that I am a firm believer of kind of bringing your authentic self to the table, in no matter what you're doing. So in an interview, in meeting someone, you want to bring your authentic self because you want them to be able to see you. And as you get into different roles and as you start exploring more and finding out what you like and what your skill set is, to not ignore that. I think it took me a really long time to reconcile in my own mind, like, you're in corporate America, you're a social worker, like you have your LICSW, like your independent licensure, like what are you doing here? You're, you know, wasting your career on something that you went to school for that you're not necessarily doing. And that was a conversation that I had with myself a lot, but I think that you get to a point where you recognize, without having that education that I did, I wouldn't have followed the path that I had, and I wouldn't have ended up where I am now, which is incredibly happy, utilizing my skill set that I learned over time. Is like, yeah, maybe I went into social work because I liked a lot of elements and aspects of it, but then being able to ultimately figure out, like, I like to fix broken things, and my skill set is translatable to working in the community with people, or obviously working in kind of a corporate setting and looking at things from a bigger picture, and still knowing that being in a corporate environment, we do have an end customer, and the work that I do, and I tell this all the time, is that I feel like I do more social work in my corporate position, in meetings and dealing with people and personalities. I feel like I use a tremendous amount of my skills in this role, maybe sometimes more so than I did when I was actually working in the community. But to pay attention and to try to stay true to yourself, figuring out the things that you love and going for them.
Yep. That's great. So what some of the specific advice that we're hearing is networking. The students have certainly heard that from me ad nauseum. And again, I'm happy to help them with that. But I think the idea too of being open to things that you might not have considered is really a big deal. I just know from a personal perspective, in my lifetime, I never thought I'd be working at Regis College. I loved Regis, but it just, you know, life is long and your needs change, your wants change. Some people stay on a projected path, which is great. Not everybody does, and that's good as well. And, you know, being open to ideas, but also in terms of networking, specifically using LinkedIn and taking advantage of your alumni association. if I could maybe, and I know I didn't publicize this question to the panelists ahead of time, so I hope that's okay. But what role has Regis College played in your career, in your trajectory? If anyone can think of, I mean, because I know it certainly helped me, but I'm just curious if you guys could think of a way in which your Regis Education and or Alumni Association has been able to help you.
I can try. So, you know, I think with my degree, I sort of stayed in the same area of work, of focus, but I think the most important thing I learned when I was at Regis, and this sounds so cheesy, was, again, it was all girls when I was there, but was just like empowerment, all women, I apologize. It was more like empowerment and leadership skills and things along that, like play basketball with Caitlin and or Shea, as I like to say it. But you know, we learned a lot of teamwork, leadership skills. Again, I was an RA. I think actually all of us were RAs at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's those, like, I guess, like leadership skills that you learn by taking on additional responsibilities while on campus. So being an RA, being in the student government, you know, being on a basketball team or a sporting team, stuff like that. I think that was stuff that I thought was more important, the leadership and service that you learn. And I don't know if it still happens with the leadership and service awards that at graduation.
Yes,
I don't know if that's something. I have mine different color tassels still somewhere in my house. And I, you know, I think that was the stuff that was the most important that I learned from Regis that I carry forward with me, was those, they're definitely not soft skills, but I guess maybe you could consider them soft skills of like how to drive work, how to drive teams, how to, you know, kind of pull people together towards like one main goal, which is how I've learned to kind of lead my team, and I take those skills.
That's terrific. Does anyone else have a comment or thought about how Regis may have helped prepare you or helped shape you?
I can kind of make a quick statement, kind of piggybacking off of what Amanda and Danielle have said in terms of the empowerment, which is a very real thing. And then I think too, speaking to Amanda and the networking, I was able to find out about other opportunities professionally because I stayed in touch with individuals at Regis, which then ultimately got me back working at Regis for 3 years. Any position that I have gotten, with the exception of my first job at Bay Path University, any position that I've gotten in my 13 years of working has been because I have known somebody at that institution or that organization. And a lot of that comes from not burning bridges when you move on, or when you're a young grad. Stay in touch with the individuals, stay in touch with your coaches, stay in touch with your residential coordinators, stay in touch with anybody who had a positive impact on your life. Because sometimes, even though it might not be for 3 or 4 or 10 years down the road, those relationships typically circle back. In my 13 years of working, I'm astonished at the number of individuals that I've popped back and forth with, that I came into contact with younger in my professional career. So I think for those young grads that are out there, a piece of advice as well, stay in touch with those individuals that meant something to you at Regis, because they may be able to help you launch long-term at some point. But do take those skills that Danielle had talked about in terms of those relationship skills, building, kind of the networking, all of that. Finding your voice, take that and let it lead you to what those next steps may look like, but don't forget kind of the past, because those people eventually can play a really pivotal role in your next steps.
That's great. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I know for myself, it was a long time ago now, but I learned, Regis College gave me the confidence to try new things, whether I had really knew how, you know, just because I hadn't done something before didn't mean I couldn't figure it out. And for me, that's just has been a gift that stayed with me throughout my career. So again, I know everybody, you know, it is a small school, but it's amazing the reach that such a small school has, you know, in that way. If we could just take a few minutes and open this up to some student questions to see if anyone out there has one, that would be great. Don't leave me hanging here, guys. Okay, and that's great. Just wanted you guys to know, just a couple of things on the job market in general. As I opened this session, I opened it to tell you about some exciting things that some of your classmates have done. Oh, I'm sorry, Maria.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, do our graduates have access to the chat as well?
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you.
So if they want to pose a question in the chat, we could certainly do it that way. Thank you. Okay.
Susan,
Yeah.
I had just one thing.
The educator in me, right? Different access to learning.
That's great.
Amanda, I hate to put you on the spot, but when we first started talking about this event, I thought you did a really great job about reminding people that when you are interviewing, that it's not just people being interviewed by the employer, but it's also the interviewee interviewing the employer. So do you want to just chat a little bit more about that? Because I thought that was a really good piece of advice.
Yeah, definitely. I think that employers are coming around to that idea. I think a lot historically, it was just kind of like, well, here's the job and these are our benefits. And, you know, that's sort of it. And I think that as things have changed since all of us have graduated from college, and different generations are coming up, they understand that new, young grads who are looking for jobs are looking for more than just a job. They're looking for, it's not necessarily perks that come with it, but sometimes they can be considered perks, sure. And I think that, benefits is certainly one thing. The flexibility in the work is that something else? Work from home is obviously something that a lot of places are doing, that I'm certainly doing right now. It was something very, 8 years ago when I started at the company, or 9 at John Hancock specifically, it was only fundamental conversations being started. So just to see how far it's come since then is because, employers are kind of recognizing that people want a good employer that, has a matching program for donations, or has programs and really good benefits and parental leaves for people who want to start families. So I just want to remind you all that it's really fair and on the table to ask about, things like that as far as a company is concerned when you get to a certain point in the interview or in the offering of the job, to find more out about their benefits. And I think a little bit more specifically what Molly's talking about too, when you're in the position of having that interview and, they're asking you those kind of tough or challenging questions about, your skills and things like that, I think it's always great to get a sense from them, especially whoever it is that will be interviewing you. What are their likes? What are their dislikes about how things kind of function? How do they value employees? Do they have an employee recognition program, or do they find value in that? I think that it's, obviously in these uncertain times, it's very difficult to look a job offer or something in the face and say, oh no, that doesn't align with what I like. I'll just take a hard pass on that. I think it's just important that you be mindful of that, because a job is great, but there has to be some sort of enjoyment or fulfillment in it for you that you're looking for too. With the understanding of, obviously you don't want to be too selective and, finding the perfect thing, because you want to be able to get your foot in the door. But there's nothing wrong with asking those politely, those questions about how they view employees, how they kind of view their business, what is the values that are ingrained into their business. I know John Hancock has 5 core values that it operates by. So, and especially if you show that kind of engagement in them and their company and their values, they're really going to see that, you're in there and you're sitting at a position of, you're serious. Mm-hmm. And you're really interested in knowing more about not only the job, but what they as a business and a company can offer you as well.
Yep. And just to kind of tag onto that just very quickly, employers, when they're interviewing you, and you guys can jump in, they want to make this work. They are not looking, everybody's on the same page. They just want to make sure that it is a good fit. So, when you get to an interview and that kind of thing, just try to remember that. you know, that they want this to work. Maria?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to piggy off that with what you just said, and Amanda, I think I remember being, because an education major, you do your student teaching your senior year. And remember an opportunity coming up where I was completing my student teaching. And I remember Sister Costello and Sister Abruzé having conversations with me about this. And graduating in 2008 was difficult, but I declined. And then I remember sending out 21 applications and getting only 3 calls, of which I declined. Because even in the interview, you have to know, does it feel right? Do you think you're a good fit? And if you are having hesitation, I love it as hiring authority now for 7 years when I get callbacks from candidates who say, do you mind if I spend a day in the building? Those are signs to me that the person wants to make it a good fit just as I do. And it shows persistence that they are interested and want to be there. So I remember then taking a different route and just sending my resume to the human resources departments of the specific towns I would be interested. And so here I am 13 years later, I got a call back from that. There was no position open. It was August 20 something, 3 days before school started. And I walked in, grabbed textbooks, and the rest is history. So I think that a lot of patience and knowing that it absolutely, like Amanda said, has to be a good fit for you just as much as the employer. The outcome of that, of you taking something that you are not interested in, is only you performing very, less of your ability, not showing your full potential, and just leading into uncomfortable conversations that you don't want to have. So I think it's patience, accepting when it feels right, it has to be a good fit. And of course, for me, it was going beyond the interview, and it is always something that that is a highlight for me with specific candidates. When you show that interest and you're persistent and you go beyond the interview, not just especially now remotely, not just a virtual interview and an email, but go beyond what other things can you do to see if it's a good fit in your area. That's what I would say. And then my last one is apply to anything that you don't always look at qualifications and what the requirements are. Like, don't think that you're not good enough for any job. If the description is something you think you could do, go for it. Just apply, because there's meeting you in person, having conversations over the phone, and getting you in the job field is what shows if you have potential to fulfill those duties, not just a piece of paper.
I agree with that. We did just get a student question in. What does it mean to be a woman in leadership to you? How do you try to lift up other women with the positions you have?
I would love to answer this one because I have a horror story. So when before I hit my leadership role, I worked under some women that maybe didn't really support women as much as you'd want. So I received like the opposite of what I do now. So I had a daughter in 2014. I just had to think about that. She's 5.5. But when I came back from maternity leave, it was very, very hard for me. There was no transition. So it was come back and go back to your job. And that's not really how it should work. I personally believe I had 12 weeks off, which isn't enough as well. I'll get through all that later. But, when you come back to work, you need the support of your peers and your management team. And I didn't really get that. It came back to, well, here's your team. Here's everything they've done for the past 3 months. Good luck. And I was drowning and I had no help. I didn't, and I would have expected that the women in leadership on my team who also have children would have understood what it was like to have a newborn and to not be expected. So our job, we support hospitals, so we are 24/7. I was assigned some near instant, like 2 weeks after my return, after hours work. And I was expected to do that while my newborn still wasn't sleeping and my husband worked overnights for the police department in Cambridge. So it was tough. And I think what I do, and I've taken those bad lessons, the bad examples I've seen set, and try to change it. So now I have a few people on my team who are expecting or have had kids, and if they've had a bad day, I just tell them to stay home. Like, if you didn't sleep last night, don't come in. It's just going to make you sick. It's not going to make anything better. take a nap, log on later. I take the more softer approach where I make sure that people get what they need. You know, I think any other woman who expresses interest in a leadership position, there is nothing in me that feels threatened or, you know, oh, well, this person's coming for my job. No, they want to help me. They want to learn from me and gain experience so they can enhance their career. And I wasn't given someone to like a mentor or a guide to say, this is how you get here. But I try every day to make sure that I realize it's not a competition and that it's a step ladder for someone else to get where you are. And I think that that is the most important thing as a woman. You need to realize that it is not a competition. There is room for everyone. And you definitely want to make sure you share and help with others. My long-winded female rant.
That's terrific. Anyone else on that question about, you know, lifting other women up?
I can share. I don't know if I have anything like super specific. I haven't been in a position yet where I have any direct reports or anyone reporting to me. I guess I'll just say you will see varying examples, like Danielle kind of alluded to, of women and men in positions of leadership. Then some align with your style and some will definitely not. And you certainly can learn from them. Some situations might be difficult to navigate, but I think that it's all in the learning stages. And then you'll begin to figure out stylistically what works for you. I can say that as far as in the position where I am now, funny that I think about it, since I've been in John Hancock, I've only had women leadership. I've reported to a woman in all three of the positions that I've had, which has been incredibly fortunate. One of my previous was also a social worker that came to John Hancock, so we had a lot in common there. But more recently, I also report to a woman who is a senior director. And I think that I seek that out. I think that, like Danielle said, a lot of women in positions of leadership are in those positions for those right reasons, to be able to help and guide and learn. And even though I'm in a position that I love and I love doing what I'm doing, there's always more for me to learn and there's always more for me to grow. So I think that coming from Regis and having that supportive leadership, as someone mentioned, we were all RAs, so it's kind of like in us. we like that stuff. And I think Regis only, fostered and supported that in all of us. And I think to go into any situation, whether it be a learning, a first job, a second one, whatever it might be, with that kind of desire to always learn and that desire to kind of have that intrinsic motivation to align yourself with someone that you can see as like a mentor or a peer, and you will watch their skill set and their modeling of leadership. And then I feel like in my career, the more that I have watched and I have seen, I've been able to integrate that into my own style and hope one day that I'll be in a position where I can do that for somebody else too. Somebody else who's younger than me or who's just coming from a different background or position that I could then pass that on to them with as well.
Great, thank you. Any other student questions at this point? Okay. So we've heard a lot of really good things today, some specific advice, being open to new ideas. Don't read the list of qualifications and decide, I'm not going to go for that. I don't have enough of what it takes. Employers want to make it work. The importance of networking. But, please don't forget that, your former employers, your internship site managers, your faculty, my office, the Alumni Association, we're all here for you. And, I really encourage you to take advantage of that, particularly this year. you know, everybody remembers their first job. Everybody wants to help someone get their first job. And as I have twins that just graduated from colleges, and I said to them, look, this year you're going to get the pity job. You know, people are going to feel bad for you. Take advantage of it. So I do want to thank our panelists, and Caitlin, Amanda, you know, Maria, and Danielle. Really appreciate your openness. And you guys are great representatives of Regis. So I just want to say thank you. We really appreciate it. Without further ado, I'm not sure if anyone has any other parting comments they'd like to make, but I'm trying to keep an eye. I'm trying to be mindful of time because I know you're all in your lunch hour.
No, I think this was great. Thank you. And if anybody on the call wants to find us on LinkedIn, I know that, you know, even with everything that's been going on in the economy, my job that's focused on, you know, insurance and insurance facing staff, we were hiring a ton, and we are still hiring for entry-level positions. So I'm very happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn or anything like that. Susan, I could send you the link to my profile, or if you want to send it out, I'm sure that we'd all be willing to share to connect with folks and see.
That would be terrific. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all. And again, I encourage the students, you know how to find me. I'm happy to help at any time, and good luck to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.